My name is Alara, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been painted in two distinct palettes. The first was the soft, misty gray greens of Port Blossom, the coastal Oregon town where I grew up, a place of quiet drizzle and the enduring scent of pine and sea salt. The second, more vibrant and alive in my imagination, was the sun-bleached terracotta and Renaissance gold of Florence, a city I had only ever met in the pages of art history books. At 22, I was finally living in that second palette, a student of art conservation, spending my junior year abroad breathing the same air as the masters I revered. My life in Florence was a carefully constructed mosaic of small joys: the morning ritual of a cappuccino at the corner bar, the dusty, hallowed silence of the Uffizi Gallery on a quiet Tuesday, the smooth, cool weight of a centuries-old sculpture beneath my careful fingers in the restoration lab. It was a life I had built myself, piece by painstaking piece, funded by years of academic scholarships, relentless saving from a part-time job at my university's library, and the nest egg my family had contributed to since I was a child, my college fund. That life, that carefully assembled future, fractured on a Tuesday afternoon in May. The call came as I was sketching the Ponte Vecchio from my small apartment window, the warm light of the Tuscan sun slanting across my drawing pad. It was an investment, Laurie. For all of us, my father said. His voice, usually a warm and confident baritone, was unnervingly casual through the phone speaker, as if he were discussing the weather, not the fact that he had just confessed to emptying my entire college account. This Tuscan vineyard, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You have to spend money to make money, you know. The pencil in my hand stilled. Outside, the Arno River flowed on, oblivious. An investment? I repeated, my voice a hollow echo of his words. My heart had begun a frantic, panic drumming against my ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. Exactly. And it's going to pay off big. For the whole family. Dad, I said, forcing a calm I did not feel into my tone. My hand was shaking so badly I had to put the pencil down. That money was for my senior year. For my degree. How much is left? There was a brief, telling pause. Well, that's the thing about investments, sweetheart. You have to go all in, he said with a little laugh, a sound that was meant to be charming but landed like a shard of glass. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. What's done is done. We'll figure something out. You always do. You always do. The words hung in the air between Florence and Port Blossom. It was his mantra for me, a compliment that was actually an abdication of responsibility. I was the practical one, the planner, the daughter who always figured it out so he didn't have to. I had been figuring things out my whole life, figuring out how to gently refuse when he'd asked to borrow my birthday money for a tank of gas, figuring out how to pay for my own school trips when he'd spent the fund on a new set of golf clubs, figuring out how to explain to my mother, Sophia, why another one of his brilliant business ideas had failed to materialize. I had opened that savings account when I was 16, proud of my first paycheck from the local bookstore. At his insistence, he was made a co-signer. Just in case of emergencies, Laurie, he'd said, ruffling my hair. It's always good to have family backup. I never imagined the emergency would be him. I see, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The vibrant colors of Florence outside my window seemed to fade, draining into the gray tones of home. That's my girl, he said, misinterpreting my stunned silence as acquiescence. Always seeing the big picture. Listen, I've got to run, meeting a potential distributor. This is going to be huge. We'll talk soon. He hung up, leaving me in the echoing silence of my apartment. He was meeting a distributor with my tuition money. He was building his dreams on the rubble of mine. My phone buzzed a moment later with a text. Don't say anything to your mother or Nana just yet. No need to worry them until there's good news to share. Of course. His secrets were always packaged as protection. He didn't want them to worry, just as he hadn't wanted them to worry about the loan he took out against their house for an olive oil import scheme that soured, or the credit card debt he'd racked up in my mother's name. The good news he promised was a mythical creature, always just over the horizon, forever out of reach. I sank into the chair at my small wooden desk, the scent of linseed oil and old paper from my restoration kit filling my senses. I looked at my hands, stained with pigment and plaster dust. These hands had worked for that money. They had shelved thousands of books, written countless essays, and delicately, reverently, cleaned the grime from forgotten masterpieces. They had earned a future. And my father, with a few careless clicks of a mouse, had tried to steal it. He had always praised my artistic talent, but dismissed my ambition. "It's a lovely hobby, sweetheart," he'd say when I talked about my passion for conservation. He saw my diligence and my savings not as a sign of my character, but as a resource he could tap into. He thought my quiet nature was weakness. He believed my practicality meant I would simply accept the unacceptable. He had no idea that my practicality was about to become his reckoning. I turned on my laptop, the screen's bright glow a stark contrast to the growing dimness in my heart. I created a new folder on the desktop and named it simply Evidence. Then I began to build my case. The next week passed in a surreal haze. By day, I went to my classes and my internship at the prestigious Studio Gagliardi. I learned about chemical solvents and the delicate art of painting, my hands steady as I worked on a 16th century panel painting, my mind a turbulent sea of numbers and betrayals. By night, I became a forensic accountant of my own life. The account had held just over 38,000 euros. It was all there in the digital statements I downloaded, a meticulous record of my life's work. Deposits from my library job, labeled Univ LB. Transfers from my scholarship fund, clearly marked. Birthday checks from my grandmother, Nana Elena, with memo lines that read, "For my brilliant artist." And then, the withdrawals. A series of transfers to an account I didn't recognize, all made within the last 3 weeks. They started small, a few thousand here and there, then escalated until the final, gut-wrenching transaction that had drained the balance to zero. My father, Leo, had siphoned away my future, drip by drip, while I was an ocean away, trusting him. My roommate, Chiara, a fiery Florentine with a heart as big as her vocabulary of expressive hand gestures, found me one evening hunched over my laptop, surrounded by a fortress of printed bank statements. "Alara, what is this? You look like you are preparing for war," she said, peering over my shoulder. Her eyes scanned the columns of figures. "Leo, that is your father's name, no?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She read a few of the withdrawal lines, her brow furrowed. "He took this?" "All of it," she asked, her voice dropping from cheerful curiosity to shocked disbelief. "Mache cosa?" "This is theft. You must call the carabinieri." "I can't," I explained, the words tasting like ash. His name was on the account. Legally, it was his money, too. I leaned back, the exhaustion of the past few days settling into my bones. I just never believed he would do it. I should have remembered all the other times. I told her about the small things, the patterns I had spent a lifetime excusing. The $50 borrowed from my wallet as a teenager that was never returned. The time he'd convinced me to put a new laptop for his business on my first credit card, promising to make the payments, leaving me to deal with the debt. "It's to build your credit score," he'd chirped. All the little betrayals that now looked like practice runs for the main event. His texts continued to arrive daily, each one a little pebble of manipulation tossed into the churning waters of my anxiety. "Thinking a gap year might be a great idea for you. See the world a bit. Don't worry so much about school, Laurie. The real education is in living life. This vineyard is going to make us all rich. You'll be able to open your own gallery." Each message was a testament to how little he understood me. My education wasn't a burden, it was my passion. My independence wasn't a phase, it was the foundation of my identity. To him, my future was a commodity, something to be leveraged for his own fleeting dreams. I started making calls, my voice quiet and measured. I spoke to the financial aid office at my home university and at the institute in Florence, gathering information, exploring options for emergency loans and scholarships. I didn't tell them the whole story, not yet. I was still mapping the battlefield. Then came the call that solidified my resolve. I was in the lab, carefully applying a solvent to a darkened corner of the panel painting, when my phone buzzed. It was him. "Hey, Princess, quick thought," he began, his voice breezy. "You're so good at saving. You don't happen to have another little nest egg tucked away somewhere, do you?" Just thinking ahead. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it stole my breath. He wasn't just a thief, he was a thief planning his next heist, and he was asking his victim for a map to the treasure. The casual entitlement, the way he framed his greed as fatherly concern, it was all so clear to me now. The love I had for him, a warm and steady flame my whole life, flickered and went cold, replaced by something harder, clearer. Something like steel. "Why do you ask, Dad?" I kept my voice light, a painter mixing colors for a delicate sky. "Oh, just looking out for my girl's future. Looking out for my future. The way a wolf looks out for a lamb. I'm in the middle of something important, Dad." "I have to go," I said, and hung up before he could reply. I immediately opened my banking app and transferred the meager balance of my checking account, less than €400, to a new account at an entirely different Italian bank, one he couldn't possibly know about. That evening, an email landed in my inbox. It was from Nonna Elena. "Cara mia, I spoke to your father today. I asked him how you were enjoying Florence and if your funds were holding up. He became very quiet. Is everything all right, Alara?" A small, grim smile touched my lips. He was afraid of my grandmother. Nonna Elena was the matriarch of our family, a woman forged from equal parts Tuscan steel and Oregon cedar. She ran her life and her household with a quiet, unshakable sense of integrity that her son had somehow failed to inherit. She saw through his charm to the hollow spaces beneath. I took a deep breath and began to type. "Nana, can we talk? There is something you need to know." The video call was a somber triptych. On the screen, I saw my grandmother, Nonna Elena, sitting at her familiar kitchen table in Port Blossom, a cup of chamomile tea steaming in her hands. To her right was my mother, Sophia, her face etched with a familiar, anxious tenderness. To her left sat my Aunt Isabella, my mother's younger sister, her expression already sharp and focused. Isabella was a lawyer, and her presence told me Nana was not taking this lightly. I told them everything. I didn't cry. I presented the facts as I had gathered them, my voice steady. I shared my screen, showing them the bank statements, the neat columns of my deposits followed by the jagged, frantic withdrawals made by my father. I showed them his texts, his blithe dismissal of my life's work, his casual inquiries about any other money I might have. I watched their faces as the story unfolded. Nonna Elena's expression hardened, her gentle grandmotherly visage receding to reveal the formidable matriarch beneath. Aunt Isabella's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in her cheek. It was my mother's reaction that pained me most. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that was slowly curdling into a deep, profound sadness. He told me you were thinking of taking a year off," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "He said you were feeling overwhelmed and wanted to come home for a while." Of course he had. Leo was a master storyteller, a weaver of narratives where he was always the hero, or at least the well-intentioned victim of circumstance. How many times had he reframed my accomplishments to reflect well on him? My scholarships were a result of the good genes he'd given me. My disciplined savings were a product of the financial savvy he'd taught me. He was the sun, and I was just a moon, reflecting his light. "I have documented everything," I said, bringing their attention back to the screen. "Every withdrawal, every text, every lie. I am not letting him destroy my future." Aunt Isabella leaned closer to her camera. "The cosigner issue makes a direct theft claim difficult, Alara. But this isn't just about the money anymore. This is about a pattern of financial abuse and manipulation. Did he ever make any promises to you in writing about this money being for your education? I clicked through my files, pulling up old emails from my high school graduation. So proud of you, Laurie. This college fund is our investment in your brilliant future, he had written. I showed them texts from a few months ago before a tuition payment was due. Just let me know when you need me to transfer the funds for you. It's all safe and sound. Perfect, Aunt Isabella said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. Not a contract, but it establishes intent. It proves he knew the specific purpose of that money. It's leverage. Leverage for what? My mother asked, her voice small. Nana Elena looked directly into the camera, her dark eyes finding mine across the thousands of miles. For what comes next, she declared, her voice resonating with an authority that left no room for argument. Next, we remind Leonardo exactly who he is dealing with. He has forgotten that this family is built on rock, not sand. The plan, under Aunt Isabella's sharp guidance, was simple and swift. Nana would confront him first, a quiet declaration of war. Isabella would then draft a formal repayment demand, outlining his options with chilling legal precision. And my mother, her eyes finally, painfully open, would begin the process of untangling her life from his. He has always seen you as an extension of himself, Tesoro, my grandmother said, her voice softening with an old ache. A pretty, smart accessory to his life. It is time for him to learn that you are your own person. A masterpiece, not a copy. That night, as if on cue, my father called. His tone was cautious, probing. Your Nana called me earlier, he said. She seemed tense. You haven't been bothering her with our little financial hiccup, have you? The dam of my composure, so carefully maintained for days, finally broke. But it was not a flood of tears. It was a flood of ice. Which hiccup, Dad? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. The one where you stole my college fund? The one where you decided your fantasy of owning a vineyard was more important than my degree? Or the general, ongoing hiccup where you believe your daughter is your personal emergency fund? There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Then he tried his old trick. Now, princess. Don't, I cut him off, the single word as sharp as a scalpel. Don't call me that. Don't call me at all. From now on, any communication goes through Aunt Isabella. Isabella? Why on earth would your aunt be involved in this? He sputtered, the first crack appearing in his confident facade. Because she's my lawyer, Dad, I said, and for the first time in a week, I felt a flicker of power. And I think you're going to need one, too. My father's reaction was a predictable, pathetic symphony in 3 movements. First came the denial, texted to me in a flurry of indignant messages. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It was a family investment. Then came the anger. How dare you turn my own mother against me? After everything I've done for you. Finally, the third and most familiar movement, manipulation. You're tearing this family apart over money. I thought I raised you to be more forgiving than that. I read each message with a strange sense of detachment, a scientist observing a specimen. I forwarded every single one to Aunt Isabella with a simple note, for the file. I was no longer a participant in his drama, I was the archivist of his downfall. His next move was to appear on Nana Elena's doorstep in Port Blossom, a bouquet of wilted-looking roses in his hand. My grandmother, as she recounted to me later, met him at the door and did not invite him in. She stood on the threshold of the home he grew up in, a silent guardian at the gate. Leonardo, she said, her voice low but carrying in the quiet neighborhood street. To steal from a stranger is a crime. To steal from your own child is a sin. There is no redemption for that in this house. Mother, please, he hissed, glancing at the neighbor's window. Let's not make a scene. The scene was made when you logged into your daughter's bank account, she replied, her voice unwavering. You have disappointed me for the last time. Now leave my property. He left, but his digital assault continued. He tried to paint me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter. He tried to appeal to a sense of family loyalty that he himself had desecrated. "I'm your father. You owe me respect." I thought about respect. I thought about how he'd belittled my academic dreams, how he'd tried to saddle me with his debts, how he'd seen my hard-earned success as his own personal windfall. Respect, I was learning, had to be earned. It wasn't a birthright of parenthood. Aunt Isabella's official letter, delivered by certified mail, was a masterpiece of legal prose. It detailed, down to the last euro, the money he had taken. It listed the evidence of his intent, the emails, the texts. It concluded with two options: a voluntary repayment plan, with interest, to begin immediately, or a civil suit for conversion and fraud, which would make his actions a matter of public record. He called me, his voice the choked combination of rage and disbelief. "You can't see your own father." "I can," I replied, my voice as calm as the surface of a still lake. "And I will." Then I hung up and blocked his number. The fallout rippled through our extended family like a shockwave. The carefully constructed image of Leo, the charming, generous bon vivant, shattered into 1,000 pieces. His sister, my Aunt Patricia, called me, her voice trembling with a weary sort of vindication. "He did the same to my kids, Alara," she confessed. Smaller amounts. Money from their birthday cards, their first paychecks. He'd say it was for a short-term loan. We always let it go because he's family. The dam of silence that had protected him for years was finally breaking. The most significant consequence came from my mother. Armed with the truth and supported by her sister and her mother, she found a strength I had never seen in her. She filed for divorce, citing financial infidelity and years of economic abuse. During the initial discovery process, the full extent of my father's deception came to light. Hidden credit cards, the second mortgage on their home, investments made in her name without her knowledge. He wasn't just careless, my mother told me on a call, her voice filled with a new, hard-won clarity. He was predatory. He treated our entire family like his own private bank, and I was the head teller, smiling and approving all the withdrawals. Meanwhile, I was fighting my own battles in Florence. The university's financial aid office, once I laid out the stark, documented truth of my situation, was remarkably compassionate. They helped me secure an emergency grant and structured a manageable payment plan for my final year. Professor Bianchi, the head of the conservation department and my mentor at Studio Gagliardi, was appalled when I confided in him. He quietly arranged to have my internship position converted into a paid apprenticeship. "Talent like yours, Alara, must not be wasted because of the foolishness of others," he'd said, his kind eyes looking at me with respect. "Your work, your dedication, that is your true inheritance. Protect it." Every small victory in Florence felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. Every brushstroke on the panel painting, every new technique I mastered, was an act of defiance. I was not the damsel in distress my father's actions had tried to make me. I was the artist, restoring my own life. His desperation grew in proportion to my burgeoning independence. He began trying to poison the well, telling younger cousins that I was a greedy, vengeful person trying to bankrupt him over a simple misunderstanding. This tactic backfired spectacularly. My cousin Marco, now a freshman in college, sent me a screenshot of my father's message. "Watch out for Alara," it read. "She's gotten cold. Money is all she cares about now." Marco's reply was attached below. "Uncle Leo, the only reason I still have a college fund for you to worry about is because Aunt Isabella helped me move it to a new bank last week. Thank you for the warning, though. It was very helpful." His web of charm and deceit, so carefully woven over decades, was unraveling thread by thread. And I, an ocean away, was finally learning to weave something new for myself. A safety net of boundaries, self-respect, and the unwavering support of the people who truly loved me. A year later, the landscape of my life, and my family's, was irrevocably altered. My father's world had shrunk to the size of his consequences, while mine had expanded in ways I'd never imagined. The divorce was finalized. The discovery of his hidden accounts and secret debts had resulted in a settlement that heavily favored my mother, leaving him with a mountain of liabilities and a tarnished reputation. Aunt Isabella's legal pressure had been relentless, forcing him to sign a legally binding repayment agreement for my stolen funds. The payments were garnished directly from the paycheck of the first real, non-speculative job he'd had to get in over a decade, selling insurance. The man who dreamed of Tuscan vineyards was now explaining deductibles and coverage limits in a drab office park on the outskirts of Port Blossom. My graduation party was not held in Oregon, but in a small, lovely trattoria in the Altrarno district of Florence. My mother and Nonna Elena flew in for the occasion. It was a celebration not just of my degree, which I had earned with honors, but of a resilience I never knew I possessed. My mother, radiant and relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years, had come with her new partner, a kind, steady man who looked at her with simple, uncomplicated adoration. Nonna Elena, at 76, navigated the cobblestone streets like a native, her spirit as indomitable as ever. "Your father called me last week," my mother said, as we shared a bottle of Chianti. "He wanted me to talk to you, to see if you would consider forgiving the rest of the debt. He said he's learned his lesson." "Has he?" I asked, swirling the deep red wine in my glass. I thought of the social media posts he still made, carefully curated photos from past, more prosperous times, with vague captions about bouncing back and new beginnings. My mother sighed, a sound free of its old anxiety. "No. He's learned that he can no longer control you. He's learned that there are consequences. That's not the same as learning a lesson." The monthly payments arrived in my bank account like clockwork, each one a cold, impersonal reminder of the boundary I had been forced to draw. He had tried to get out of it, of course. He'd sent me a pleading email a few months prior. "I'm still your father, Laurie. We're family. Family is supposed to forgive and forget." I had replied with my last ever direct communication to him. "Love is not a blank check, Dad. And boundaries are what you get when you betray trust." My career at Studio Gagliardi was blossoming. Professor Bianchi had taken me on full-time after graduation, and I was entrusted with more and more responsibility. The quiet, focused work of restoration was a balm to my soul. It was a process of revealing what was true and beautiful beneath layers of grime and neglect. It felt deeply, profoundly symbolic. The family dynamics back home had found a new, healthier equilibrium. The conspiracy of silence around my father's behavior was gone, replaced by a network of mutual protection. Aunt Patricia had started a family group chat, hilariously titled Leo Watch, where she and my cousins would share his latest attempts to borrow money or solicit investments in his fantastical schemes. "He tried to get my son to co-sign a lease on a new car," she reported one day. "Told him it would be a great way to build his credit." We all know how that story ends. It did sound familiar. It was the same tactic he'd used on me at 18. But back then, I was alone. Now, his patterns were exposed to the light for everyone to see. Watching his world contract as mine grew filled me not with a sense of vengeful victory, but with a quiet, somber validation. Every payment he was forced to make, every success I achieved on my own terms, was proof of a simple, heartbreaking truth. He was always capable of doing the right thing. He just never thought he had to. My success had become my shield. The degree he tried to take from me now hung, framed, on the wall of my Florentine apartment. Each project I completed, each promotion I earned, was another stone in the fortress I was building around my future, a future he could no longer touch. His greatest mistake wasn't stealing my money. It was in fundamentally misunderstanding its purpose. He thought it was a safety net for him. He never realized it was my wings. 2 years after the phone call that nearly shattered my world, I stood on my small balcony, looking out at the terracotta rooftops of Florence as the evening bells of Santo Spirito began to chime. My apartment, once a symbol of a precarious dream, was now simply home. It was paid for with my own salary, filled with books I had bought, art I had collected, and a sense of peace I had fought for. My father's attempts to re-enter my life had become almost pitiably transparent. A birthday card arrived, the first in years, with a flowery, hollow message about how he was so proud of our accomplishments. My mother had laughed when I told her. Our accomplishments? The audacity is almost impressive. Then came the social media campaign. He would tag me in old photos from my childhood, captioning them with saccharine memories of how he'd always known I was destined for greatness in the art world. It was a blatant, desperate attempt to rewrite history, to claim a stake in the success he had actively tried to sabotage. Aunt Isabella, ever vigilant, drafted a crisp cease and desist letter when he started telling distant relatives he had invested heavily in my education. He was trying to use my name to rebuild his credibility, to borrow money against my success. The letter put a swift end to it. The final repayment arrived on a rainy Tuesday in November. It was a simple bank transfer, but he had sent a separate email to mark the occasion. The subject line read, "Paid in full." The body of the email contained only one sentence, "Now can we be family again?" I read the words and felt nothing. No anger, no surge of forgiveness, just a quiet emptiness. The question assumed that our relationship was a transaction that could be settled, a debt that could be cleared from a ledger. He still didn't understand. The money was never the point. It was the trust he had broken, the love he had weaponized. That was a debt no amount of money could ever repay. I filed the email away in my evidence folder, now renamed archive. I didn't need it anymore, but it served as a map of the territory I had crossed. Nana Lena came to visit me that spring. It was her first trip to Europe, and watching her discover the city I loved was a profound joy. We walked through the Boboli Gardens, ate gelato on the Ponte Santa Trinita, and stood in quiet awe before Botticelli's Primavera. "You know what makes me the proudest, cara mia?" she said one evening as we sat on my balcony sharing a glass of Prosecco. The setting sun bathed the city in a soft, golden light. It is not just what you have done. It is who you have become. You took his cruelty, and you did not let it make you cruel. You took his weakness, and you used it to find your own strength. He gave you stones, and you built a cathedral. As she spoke, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I knew, somehow, it was him. "Heard Nana is in town. I hope my final payment helped you afford to show her a nice time." I showed the message to my grandmother. A small, sad smile touched her lips. She raised her glass to mine, the crystal chiming softly in the evening air. "Should I respond?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Darling," she said, her eyes twinkling in the twilight. "Your life is the only response he will ever need." I looked out at the city, at the timeless curve of the Arno and the enduring dome of the Duomo. My father had thought my future was a finite resource he could steal and spend. But he was wrong. My future wasn't a sum in a bank account. It was this. It was the skills in my hands, the knowledge in my head, the strength in my heart. It was the quiet confidence of knowing that I had faced the ultimate betrayal from the person who should have protected me most, and I had not only survived, but thrived. He had wanted to know if we could be family again. But I already had a family. It was in my mother's newfound laughter, my aunt's fierce loyalty, my grandmother's unwavering wisdom. It was in the respect of my colleagues and the affection of my friends. Family, I had learned, wasn't just about blood. It was about trust. It was about the people who helped you restore the beauty in yourself when someone else had tried to paint over it. And looking at my life, I knew I was surrounded by masterpieces.